I did not know about this grandfather until December the 5th of 1990. I got one of my little magazines in the mail that day. I was so excited. I lived on an old road. It's called Wagon Trail Road. A lot of people don't know. That was way back there. That was Camp Bullis. Well, that was the road between Camp Bullis and Fort Sam. And of course, out there now, when you lay out the roads, they're straight and everything. But if you go on Wagon Trail, it's crooked as it can be, because it's an old wagon road. And there was a guy who ran an ad, a query in this magazine. He was writing a book about this ancestor I knew nothing about. But there was just enough in that article that I had learned a little bit about through some relatives. This grandfather, also, that's when he, in the way I say, he became famous in December the 5th, 1835. He was one of the leaders of the Siege of Bear. That is the battle leading up to the Alamo. He was one of the leaders. Okay. Also, they was in the grass fight, and they was at the Concepcion. And I don't know if he planned this or not, but he wrote his will December the 5th in 1874, and this is before he went to Mexico in 1884 to do research and to write this book over here. He wrote, or he helped write, 5 volumes of Texas history. But he died down there, and so they brought his body back up to Austin in 88. I'd love to put on my papers, he died in 84, but he's buried in 88. Hardly anybody ever catches that. But that's what happened. But when you go to Mexico and you die in Mexico, it takes a lot of money and a lot of red, you know. He was friends of most of those people in the early, between the 30s and the 80s. I have a letter here. After a while, I can pass this around, but he wasn't a fan of Houston's. And I've been trying to prove for years, when he was here in Missouri, he was in Missouri before he came down here. But he was born in Virginia in 1799. But then when he was a child, they left there somewhere between like 1812, 1815, somewhere along the line, he got an education. And I've been looking for that all these years, and I've not found where he got his education. But I know he did, because he writes beautifully, and plus he was a surveyor by, that's how he made his living. He was a surveyor. So he lived here on the Mississippi, in Missouri, and between 1812 to 1820, in there somewhere. And it's in the same town, same area with the Austins, same business. They're the lead mines. They're teaching school. They have grocery stores. They have liquor stores. But I can't prove that he knew the Austins before they came down here. But I know he did. But I can't prove it. But he came down the river, the Mississippi, with a load of produce, they say, down to like New Orleans or down to Galveston, but he had malaria. So went to a doctor, and the doctor said, well, you need to stay in Texas. You need to go to Texas and for the climate, and just stay here in Texas. And so that's what he did. He went over to San Felipe. That's where he went, and that's where the old 300s, were. So the old 300s, he is one of those, the old 300s, and he was a close friend of Stephen Austin. Of course, it wasn't long after that he died. Stephen Austin died, but then my grandfather was down there at San Felipe, and he's always in some fight. I don't know how many little skirmishes or little fights he was in, but it was, I'd say maybe 20. I don't know. He was in, well, after the Siege of Bear, he was down at San Patricio. By the grace of God, he made it out of that. He and about 3 or 4 of his men made it out of that. And then also he was at Goliad. Now, how he made it out of Goliad, I really don't know, but he left there before all the rest of them, were murdered on Palm Sunday of 1836. Also, he was with Fannin. Like I said, I don't know how he got out of some of these scrapes, but he did, and the rest were killed. Let's see, Goliad, yeah, Hayes. Also, up there, y'all went with me to the Hayes cabin. I didn't know it till this last month. Hayes was also part of this group. He came late. He came late, and he buried the men, he said, that were killed at Goliad, at Goliad, the Hayes. And that's the guy that has a cabin that it's about a mile up from my house. And sometimes he's down at Matamoros. They're usually looking for, they're fighting like Digos. Digos is who he's fighting with in 35. Digos really wasn't a bad man, but he was Santa Anna's brother-in-law, and he had to do what he said, So, but anyway, when they were fighting in December of 1835, well, they didn't have food, they didn't have clothing, and it was one thing after another, and so they just finally decided that, let's just stop this. So they signed a capitulation, down there, downtown, when you go downtown by the Orson Theater, and that Digos house is there, and it's across from that church. Well, that's where they signed those papers of the Siege of Bear. And of course they were supposed to leave and not come back or fight anymore. That didn't last a month or two, And then, Santa Ana was on the way back up here. I don't know, most of y'all know, I think you do know, that the Santa Ana crossed the Medina River right up here. When he's coming back here to fight in, say, February of 1836. And but my ancestor, I don't know why he wasn't at the Alamo, why he wasn't there, and why he didn't get killed. He was, I guess, looking for horses, or I think maybe he was with the one-way scrape. When Santa Ana is going through there, burning these towns, or the people are burning their own towns, I think maybe my grandfather was down there with his wife and children and all these other people. I think maybe he was part of the runaway scrape. But that group, his group went to the Trinity River. They were all there on the Brazos, but then they went to the Trinity. And my grandmother, his wife, her name was Rosalie Montague Hammer Johnson. So but she was from Louisiana, and her daddy was from Spain. And, but she's born there about 1805. She's born there in the upper part of Louisiana, up like around St. Francisville and Clinton, in that area. She was on the Thompson Creek, where the Thompson Creek runs into the Mississippi River. It's a beautiful place. Anyway, his wife, she taught school. I would say just within a few miles of where my grandmother was reared, she taught school there. And so, and I know my ancestor, she was educated, but I cannot prove either that she did attend school there in that area. But anyway, when she came to Texas, she made her living by, she was a seamstress. And I don't know if y'all have read Travis's diary, but if you read Travis's diary, every time you see something in there about Rosalie or Miss Hammer or Widow Hammer, that's my ancestor. That's Johnson's wife. Okay. And for years I've been looking, he puts in there that he goes over there, he pays her for this coat. I know it's morbid, but I'd like to think that this coat that she sewed for him was the one that he had at the Alamo. But he also would take he had a little boy that he was rearing, and that's beside Joe that he had. But for years I have been looking for this little boy's name. And this last few months when I've been doing this for another talk, it's there just plain day. 2 or 3 times the little boy's name's there. I have read that article God knows how many times. And there's that name. His name's Jared. And the little fella, I'd love to know what happened to him after the runaway scrape. I'd like to think my grandmother had him or he went with her, but I can't prove that he did. But because when she died in 1850, it lists the names of her servants and stuff, and that's not one of the names. When she died in 1850, she died there on the Trinity, which now is under Lake Livingston. And I have been trying to find her burial place for since like 90 or 95. And I know she's buried under that lake. I can't prove it, but I know she is, because that was her property. The road is still named that. It's Johnson Road that leads from a little country road over to the river, to the lake. It's Johnson Road. And I know that she's buried on her property. That's 1850. So, but then when I go down there to do research, people tell me, oh, no, we moved the bodies. We got all the little cemeteries, we moved them. Well, they didn't know she died there in 1850, you know? I said, she's under that lake. Now her daughter, some of these descendants, well, there are other places, and they've had rough lives. After the Civil War, their daughter, she was widowed 3 times, I think, within 10 years. And but she's buried on Highway 66 in Oklahoma, and in a little area called Clinton, where the museum is for 66. She's buried. She's buried there. It's a nice cemetery. But what's strange about that, and it's in these papers, later on, like with our group out here from Old Rock, this picture, that group from the Bedina Church, that W.D. Johnson, not this Johnson, but the W.D. Johnson at Old Rock, he and some other people, they go into San Antonio and start the First Baptist Church. And it's there, at that time it was across from where the courthouse is now. It was across near the cathedral. Okay, but they started there. It's not where the big Baptist church is now. They started there, and what's strange about this Navarro girl, she if you look and read, she's one of the original members of First Baptist San Antonio. She is a Navarro. And then some of the other names here. And if you read your Atascosa book, a lot of those names here went on down to Pleasanton. But anyway, this grandfather comes here. He was mayor in 1831 at San Felipe. He was close friends. Well, I think that the thing I passed out, the one about the Medina group, the Cook group, that Cook was a friend of his, a close friend of his. He fought with our grandpa at the siege of Bear. William G. Cook is a great fighter and a great man, and maybe sometime we'll get Richard Cook here which he is a descendant of the Navarros also. Get him here to speak. But anyway, Cook, he marries Angelina, or is it Angela?
It's saying in here.
Angela, he marries her back there when this fighting is going on, and after this fight at the Siege of Bear, he marries her, which she's Louisiana's daughter, not Jose's daughter.
Louisiana.
And they marry at the cathedral downtown. But that Jones name is also a group, and they were over here at Van Army, at the castle. That Jones name.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, my husband, the first day he went to work, which it was something else. But my husband, the first day he went to work for City Public Service was December the 24th. And he said he needed a job. He didn't care if it was the day before Christmas. And he really liked it that day because they were drinking. And he said after lunch they started drinking. And then he said, and told about a small world, that's his first day on the job. That was Jones Avenue. I don't know if y'all know it, but that Jones Avenue in San Antonio is named for the Jones that was out here at Van Army.
Anson Jones.
And like I said, he was part of the old 300s, and some of the places. And then also when they were coming up here from San Felipe up there to Gonzales, and when they're getting that cart and the oxen, that's down there at Bigfoot. I don't know if y'all know the Georges or not, or some people, it's Joyce people. My cousin is a descendant of James George. Well, James George was the one who donated the oxen and the cart for them to, coming up here, a part of that group. Well, that group are the ones that came from Gonzales down there. They're the ones who came up here, and they were all killed in the Alamo. That group was. My grandfather has a fort named for him up there by the Red River, and I don't know if he was ever there or not, but Cook had that fort named for him. This group that came, the Mormons stayed here at my grandpa's fort. I think it was the winter of 45 and 46. It was a hard winter, so a lot of them died there. But then they came down to I think it's called Zodiac, but it's in the Fredericksburg area, and they camped there. They had bad luck there and stuff. And then later on they came on down to Bandera, and then to the Medina River area, and then most of them they broke up. The Mormons broke up. But when you're doing research, you read all kinds of things. But I didn't know for years that those Mormons that I read about up there at Bandera had stayed in my grandpa's fort the year or two before they had come down here to Texas. It was the right group, that group of Mormons. And also a lady the other day asked me, I didn't know that Maverick had been part of this group at the Cedar Bear. You forget who's here at this time, you know. But Maverick was part of the group that was here in San Antonio when my ancestor was here, like fighting. He was part of it, and then my husband's side, which has some distant kin to Peggy's side, on the west side of town, like in Navarro and Monterey. You know how you save papers and deeds and everything? The old papers and deeds that is my husband's stepside, and thank God we have our furniture. We have early England furniture and early Alsatian furniture. And that Alsatian furniture is from these Alsatians that are from like Castroville and the west side of town. But who owned that land originally was the Mavericks. Also, the paperwork, my grandfather, he was always off of some wild goose chase, and I don't think he didn't end up with anything. Of course, he did have land grants and stuff, but he would, I think, sell them as fast as he got them. And then one of his best friends was the Governor Peace, and then the Terrell guy, that's who the Terrell, the county up there at Fort Worth is named for, and the guy named West and the guy named Lee. Thank God they had money, because they're the ones who sent him to Mexico. And they're the ones who helped him write those books and stuff. And then this Barker and Winkler, they're the ones who published his books. When they got, they got his paperwork and stuff back from Mexico. And I don't know if I told y'all, but this picture I have of him, this youngest picture, is when we went to do some research in Austin. You never know where you're going to find things when you're doing research. That picture was found in Miss D. Zavala's file. That's where that comes from. Of course, you have to order it, pay for it and all that. But she was a great, person. Now, my grandpa used to have a marker down there by the cathedral and the courthouse. Well, when they were redoing that, they moved it. God knows where it is now. I haven't seen it since. The marker down there. And then also down, I used to think he had a little camp down by the coast when they were fighting. And I used to think it was in Victoria County, but it was in Jackson County. And some of these papers here, also I have a letter here that he wrote trying to save the Alamo. Different ones have tried to save the Alamo. In 1881, there's a letter that he wrote trying to save the Alamo. Also, there's a street in King William area, supposedly is named for him. He also had a school named for him that was on South Flores. Now it's the school that's over there, its headquarters, and it's over there by the stockyards. But years ago, it was on South Flores.
Would you remind us of the name?
It was Johnson.
Johnson.
Okay. He usually went by the name Frank W. Johnson. His real name is Francis. Of course, his mother's a white. And also where they're from up there in the Potomac River, the river there by D.C., which is right up. He's born in Leesburg. His mother, I'd like to try to prove that there is a ferry still there running up the river named White. I still think it's his mother's people, but they say it's not. Also, I bring that milk carton there. I bring that because that was his friends. The Bordens, they became wealthy and everything. He had all kinds of friends with money and everything. But the Bordens, that was the Bordens, the brothers, and and they became wealthy. So I put that stuff in that Borden's thing and carry them around with me. Y'all can look at my dog. He had beautiful penmanship. And my grandmother had beautiful penmanship. And all these years that I didn't know about him, we always wondered where grandmother, got this beautiful penmanship. But we know now, where it came from. But the reason there was a problem, my grandmother there, that her daddy, something happened in Waxahachie, and they came down here and changed their name. That's why we didn't know about this Johnson. There was a little hearsay about him, but that was it. I don't know if I told y'all that. No, I don't think I did. About when my grandfather went, when they buried him in Austin, the guy that had his ceremony was named Smoot. And of all names, my maiden name, there was this guy named, but he was like an Episcopal minister there and a teacher. And they were well-to-do and well-thought-of people in Austin. But when I'm reading that the obituaries, it just blows your mind that Smoot was the one who had his service when they had his ceremony in the Capitol. And it was the new one. At the time, they had, there was a new Capitol. So this was in 1888, the new Capitol in Austin. My grandmother, the one that's Rosalie, her mother died young, and then, her daddy died young, then her mother dies, this guy named Scott in Louisiana, and they come to Texas, down there to San Felipe, and you forget that. So years later here, this letter right here is showing Travis with my grandpa, they're at this wedding. And I keep trying to think, now who is this Ann Scott and this Joseph Bowen? This grandmother, her first marriage is a Bowen, B-O-R-E-N. Okay, anyway, I keep thinking, I know that name from somewhere, what is that? Well, it finally hit me after all these years, like you say, you just overlook it. I finally realized this Ann Scott that marries this Joseph Bowen, she's my grandmother's, this Rosalie's, that's her half little sister. But, I've been reading that for ages.
Right. It takes a while till you see the connection.
Yeah. Also, I want to give him credit, this guy that I learned about this grandfather from, his name was Don Kendricks. He's the one who sent me unbelievable things. I called him that afternoon at 5 because then I waited for it's cheaper to call, And poor old guy, he was so upset because he thought he was finding somebody that could tell him something. I knew nothing. About this grandfather. I could fill in on some of the children after he called. I could tell him about my grandmother, but that's all I knew. I didn't know the other children's names or anything. But since then, we have found them. But this guy here, he was doing all this research and learning things about my grandfather. And thank God he was, because my grandfather, what he did, like my grandma's land, her cattle, he gets that stuff and he goes up to Ellis County, Watcha County. But by her first marriage, that Hammer name, that child lived next door to her, and they were very close. But I don't think he ever got a thing. He never got any of her cattle because of my grandpa. He's always on some wild goose chase, So, but this man that's doing all this research, I kept trying to find him, call him, or write him, and so I finally called the paper where he worked, but he died. But you have to be careful when people are writing. He was writing a novel, and he has my grandmother, this Rosalie. He has her married 5 times. Well, one of them was that Scott name, which I found out for sure that was her stepdaddy. And when they come to Texas together. And another thing this grandfather did, he was always with Travis and what I call cahoots. He got her land. He got her land under, I don't know how many names. If you really dig, under the Hammer name, the Johnson name, and the Scott name, that was her step name. He got her land under those different names.
He was doing hanky-panky on the side.
I have, this is where his school was. Yeah, I didn't know about that either till a lady I was doing research with at the Cedar Bear. She said, "Oh, I used to teach at the Johnson School." Had no idea, you know. But my grandfather says his daddy died in like 1827 and died in like Missouri, and you think, well, he's going to be buried there. But when you're doing research, they have him buried like in India and stuff. So I don't know if this is accurate or not, but, and then also then his daddy. But to me, I want a little bit more proof, but it could be his people. And so, I mean, his letter about the Alamo, he writes things about, here's the opening campaign of the Texas Revolution. Now this is a letter he wrote to the Frontier Times at Bandera. And it's just stuff like that that you find when you're doing research and stuff like that. And then this is Henry Briscoe, the guy from Divine, and this was about old Ben Milam. and things like that. So it just papers, and when you get to doing research, like I said, I know 6 to 10 of these notebooks about him. Of course, a lot of it is the same thing. Y'all know, once y'all are into genealogy, y'all know that once you're into it, oh, forget it. It's you know, it's you can't stop, or you don't stop. Put it that way. Like I tell people, I tell people it's worse than drinking.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, you just
It
keep
blows your
digging.
mind.
Yeah, you just keep digging, and you find so many things that just, you just can't believe it. And like who your ancestor, like who they knew and who they were associated with and everything. But it's fun. It is fun.